The film opens with Vincent Campbell and Rebecca Lane driving toward a sandstorm to reach an excavation location on Mars' desolate desert. Lane remarks that their crewmate, Kim Alrich, would be upset about the storm because it would disrupt her dig. When they arrive at the dig location, Vincent instructs Kim over the radio to finish up since they need to return to base and prepare to depart the planet in 19 hours. Kim, on the other hand, does not answer and continues digging. While they wait for Kim, Lane asks Vincent to list 10 things he won't miss about Mars. Vincent makes it plain that he can't stand Kim's attitude by including her on the list multiple times. He then expresses his fear over the 6-month flight back to Earth. Lane points out that the trek will be worthwhile because they will be walking on green grass under a blue sky at the finish. When Kim eventually boards the rover, she worries that they'll be returning to Earth empty-handed because they didn't have enough time on their 6-month mission to do anything substantial. Captain Charles Brunel instructs them to rush back to Tantalus Base because they need assistance fixing their communications link with the Aurora space station. Richard Harrington is able to restore the transmission, but the power goes out. Later, Marko Petrovic begs Brunel to accompany him to one of their excavation sites, claiming that he needs to repair a faulty gamma sensor. Brunel reluctantly agrees, but asks Marko to take Harrington with him and return before dusk. Vincent, Kim, and Lane arrive just as Marko and Harrington prepare to depart the base. Kim is outraged after finding that Brunel allowed Marko to go out. On the drive to the site, Marko tells Harrington to prepare the sample boxes and label them MA1 for microscopic anomaly. While Vincent is working on the cooling system at the base, mission psychologist Robert Irwin approaches him and offers him coffee. Vincent examines the Aurora lander's approach trajectory and notes that the pilots would be arrested for drunk driving if they were on Earth. Irwin encourages him to put off thinking about the lander until he boards the ship. When Irwin asks if he's excited to return home, Vincent responds that he's not anxious about arriving home, but he is concerned about the travel and the time it takes. Kim decides to look through Marko's workstation to find out why he wants to go back outside. Not long after that, the crew discovers an image of cavities on a rock. Lane notices that the cavities appear to be microbiological borings. When they examine the material under the microscope, they discover evidence of bacterial cell division. Kim realizes that Marko is refusing to tell Brunel about his finding because he does not want to share the credit. Brunel contacts Harrington and Marko to proclaim the excavation site closed. Marko, on the other hand, urges Harrington to pretend that he didn't hear Brunel because of the weak signal. As Marko examines the soil sample he has just taken, the ground underneath him collapses and sucks him in. Harrington jumps out of the rover to assist him, but he can't see into the pit due to the steam. Brunel arrives with Lauren Dalby to save Marko soon after Harrington contacts the base. However, Harrington deems Marko dead. Dalby believes Marko is still alive and attempts to descend the hole, but Brunel stops her out of fear that she would be injured in an accident. Brunel and Harrington return to the base to obtain the necessary equipment to collect Marko's body, while Dalby remains at the dig site. Kim inquires of Brunel about disclosing their discovery soon after they approach the facility. Harrington points out that Marko died recently, but Kim indicates that it was Marko's own responsibility for breaking protocol. Soon, Mission Control gives them permission to retrieve Marko. Before they leave, Irwin tells Brunel to chastise Kim for her actions. He assures the captain that Marko's death was not his fault, but Brunel points him that any mistakes done by the crew are his duty. Brunel returns Lane, Irwin, and Vincent to the site because he believes it would be unjust to send Harrington back. As Dalby waits in the rover, she hears someone attempting to enter the vehicle. She tries to notify Brunel via the radio, but he can't hear her owing to interference. When the team arrives at the dig site, Dalby is nowhere to be found, leading Brunel to believe she disobeyed his orders and walked into the hole. Lane, on the other hand, believes Dalby fell because disobeying a command is not in her nature. After connecting his suit to a rope, Vincent quickly falls into the abyss. As he nears the bottom, he finds a microbiological creature growing on a rock formation. He descends further but begins hyperventilating as he recalls being locked in the Aurora space station. Brunel instantly instructs Lane and Irwin to bring him back up. When Vincent has calmed down, he informs Brunel that he did not see anyone at the bottom of the pit. Irwin searches the area and discovers 2 sets of footprints that appear to be going for the facility. Brunel is puzzled since they could have taken the rover. Kim is quickly contacted by the crew, who advises her to brace herself for possible casualties. Kim speculates that Marko may be suffering from brain damage due to oxygen deprivation because his suit is likely destroyed. When Harrington examines the tracking system, he notices 2 people 50 meters from the base. As Kim tries to make radio contact, Harrington walks to the airlock to let them in. Kim notices a figure wobbling towards the bottom of the stairs on the monitors. When Harrington opens the airlock, Marco collapses to the ground with a hole in his helmet. Harrington staggers back in amazement after removing the helmet to reveal Marco's gaunt face. Marco takes an electric drill and stabs Harrington in the gut. Harrington falls to the ground, but not before sounding the alarm and alerting Kim. Kim quickly heads toward the airlock, but she soon retreats as she sees Marco approaching her. An infected Dalby quickly arrives at the airlock, but Harrington escapes despite his wound. Soon after, Marco and Dalby both catch up to Kim. Dalby sips from a spilled beverage on the ground while Kim fights to break away from Marco. Brunel arrives quickly and discovers the base in ruins. Kim is able to escape and confine the two afflicted astronauts in a chamber. As Marco smashes the glass door, Brunel orders Kim to put on a suit as he tries to protect their infected crewmates. Brunel tries to talk with Marco after he escapes, but he doesn't seem to comprehend him. Kim quickly exits the base after putting on her costume. Brunel races to the airlock, but the zombie catches him and stabs him in the shoulder before he can leave. The surviving crew members disable the door, trapping the zombies, and flee to the hydroponic dome for safety. Lane attempts to cure Brunel's wound, but she realizes she can't do it correctly because she isn't a medic. Brunel believes he's dying after forgetting the appearance of his family. He directs the crew to inform his family that he was thinking about them during the mission. Brunel then notices that he's thirsty, so Erwin brings him some water. Brunel grabs Erwin by the neck, but the other crew members pull his hand away and pacify him. Brunel quickly settles down and gradually loses consciousness. Before passing away, he reminds the crew that they will never see home again. Kim binds Brunel to the table out of concern that his corpse may reanimate. Erwin asks her to stop, but Kim reminds out that Dalby and Marco are still moving after being exposed to the atmosphere. Vincent chooses to cover the body with a blanket. Then they hear an explosion outside. Kim glances at the monitor and sees that the zombies escaped from the base after blowing up the airlock with an explosive. Because the crew was unable to contact the space station because the communication systems are down, Vincent informs them that he will have to return to the base via the oxygen feed pipe underground to repair the Skylink and request assistance. Lane gets a blood sample from Brunel as he crawls down the pipe and discovers that he has the same bacterium as Marco. After a few minutes, Vincent panics when he recalls what happened to him on the space station. Lane comforts him and tells him to forget what happened to him in Aurora. When Vincent points out that mission control is intended to pick out people like him, Lane argues that all crew members are just as terrified as he is. Vincent soon arrives at the main base and discovers blood all over the floor and walls. Meanwhile, Lane recognizes that they can try using antibiotics to neutralize the bacterium, so she collects a blood sample from Brunel to see how it would react to an antibiotic solution. Brunel's body contorts and writhes when the fluid is injected into him. Lane speculates that he's fighting the virus, but Kim insists that the movement is due to his reflexes. When the corpse stops moving, Lane collects another blood sample and learns that the bacteria is no longer proliferating. Kim pours the solution into a decontamination spray, which they may evaporate and deploy against the undead. Vincent makes contact with Aurora, but the power goes out before he can warn them of their predicament. Erwin notices via the monitor that the zombies are returning to the base since they are unable to break down the doors of the hydroponic dome. They plan to open the entrance in order to entice the zombies into the airlock and spray them with antibiotics. Soon after activating the decontamination spray, one of the zombies enters the airlock and begins writhing on the floor. Lane discovers, however, that the effect is just transitory since microorganisms have begun to build resistance to the antibiotic. Vincent comes upon an infected Harrington on his way to fix the power. He continuously bashes the zombie's head with a torch, but he won't go away, so he returns to the oxygen pipe. Vincent requests that Lane open the panel, but cautions her that he was unable to close the pipe at the other end. Lane advises Kim and Erwin to put on their helmets before opening the panel because Vincent did not seal the pipe at the base. Kim grabs 2 antibiotic bottles and throws them at the zombie after they pull Vincent out of the pipe. While Kim distracts the zombie, the others attempt to exit the dome but are unable to open the airlock. Erwin observes that Brunel's corpse is reviving, so he locks the door, leaving Kim and the other zombie inside. The survivors open the door, but the zombie stabs Lane in the leg with a scissor before they can flee. As soon as they go outdoors, the crew heads to the rover. Vincent administers an antibiotic to Lane in order to halt the bacteria and allow her body time to battle the infection. They quickly discover that the rover lacks sufficient power to reach the landing place. Erwin observes that they must travel on foot, but Lane is unable to walk due to her injury, so Vincent advises returning to the base to cure her wound. Lane surmises that he wants to leave her behind since she may be contaminated when Erwin points out that they have other options. Lane claims that Irwin is infected as well since Brunel grabbed his neck earlier. Irwin recalls another rover near Marco's dig site, noting that it still has enough power to reach the landing spot. When they arrive at the excavation location, Irwin walks to the other rover. Irwin approaches Vincent after getting inside the truck and encourages him to leave Lane behind since he feels she is contaminated. When Vincent refuses, Irwin resolves to go it alone. The zombies track them down, so Vincent and Lane drive the rover into a sandstorm in the hopes of catching up with them. Vincent claims that when the sun charges the rover's batteries for an hour, they will have enough power to reach the landing spot in the morning. Lane later admits that she wonders if some portion of Brunel's thinking remained when she watched him suffering. She is frightened that Brunel may still be imprisoned in his body and unable to control it. The Aurora lander will soon leave the space station and go to the planet. Vincent awakens in the morning to hear a transmission from the space station notifying them that an emergency crew is being dispatched to rescue them. Vincent attempts to reply to the message, but the space station is unable to hear him. Vincent notices Lane has left the vehicle and follows in her footsteps. He ultimately finds her, but Lane urges him to remain back because the illness has already begun to take effect. Vincent rushes over to her, but Lane takes off her helmet and suffocates. Her body quickly reanimates and assaults Vincent. Lane begs Vincent to murder her after he restrains her, so he grudgingly grabs a rock and bashes her head in. When Vincent notices the Aurora lander approaching, he dashes to the landing location. When Vincent notices 3 zombies approaching the lander, he warns them not to open the ship's hatch. Vincent can hear them over the radio, but the lander crew cannot. Vincent hears them crying in terror as the zombies attack them soon after they exit the ship. When Vincent enters the spacecraft, he notices Irwin in the cockpit. Irwin, while being cognizant and self-aware, is showing signs of illness, so Vincent tells him that he can't let him go home because they can't risk spreading the disease to Earth. During a scuffle, Irwin manages to pierce Vincent's helmet with a knife. Vincent snatches the knife and stabs Irwin as he tries to fly the ship. As the airplane sails into space on its own, Irwin dashes at Vincent. Vincent continually headbutts Irwin until he stops moving. He then removes his blood-splattered helmet and opens the hatch to evacuate the corpse. Later, Vincent sends a transmission to Mission Control informing them that the Tantalus base's entire crew has been infected with a virulent disease, and the relief team they dispatched has also perished. He mentions that he doesn't have enough fuel to go to the space station, but he has enough supplies to last until a rescue crew arrives. He does, however, mention that he is most certainly contaminated. He outlines his plan to return the ship to Mars if he becomes sick, so he won't die slowly and painfully as it burns up in the atmosphere. Vincent concludes the message by saying he will wait for a response after the transmission arrives at the Aurora in 15 minutes. The lander floats in space while waiting for the space station to reply. So, what do you think about this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See